Why do I care so much about this stupid PS2 TRPG?
Why?
Stella Deus and the Gate of Eternity has like no fans still talking about it in 2021. Even in 2004 when it came out, it was still super niche. Like, it was generally well received by critics, getting around 7.5 out of 10 or so from most, but the game didn't really receive much mainstream coverage or hype. Well, it did get a review from XPlay, which was just a little bit cringy.
It's Adara. She's a magic user, and I could use something to make her a little more powerful.
Blam! Shake it!
What the hell did you do? She's a little girl.
Yeah, little girl. With a big booty.
Booty, 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 booty.
Wow, what a different time. Nowadays, the handful of random discussions about Stella Deus you'll find in niche subreddits in more modern times are usually pretty negative. But here I am saying it's in my top 5 games of all time. Is my brain just broken? Like, do I love things way more solely because they're obscure and weird?
In case you haven't noticed, I'm weird. I'm a weirdo. I don't fit in, and I don't want to fit in. Have you ever seen me without this stupid hat on? That's weird.
Well, maybe that's part of it, but honestly, there's just so many things I love about this game, and after getting addicted to it for so many hours, I just gotta talk about it. Now, I should maybe add a caveat to my statements here because this game did do relatively well in Japan. So who knows, maybe the Stella Deus discourse is thriving over there, but I don't speak Japanese, so I wouldn't know what they're saying anyway. Man, I wish I did speak Japanese though, then I could listen to the Japan-only drama CD and read the Japan-only mangas. Okay, we're diving a little too deep, too quickly there. Let's back it up all the way to the beginning and take a look at the history behind the creation of the game and the notable members of the development team. The main person that's going to catch most people's eye about the dev team is that Shigenori Soejima, the character designer for many of the Persona and SMT games, was the art director and character designer for Stella Deus. And actually, Stella Deus was his first time in a higher up role in an art team like that, and so in terms of being a proving ground, they totally nailed it. Even in the most minor details, like how because the world of Stella Deus is mostly desert, the main characters don't have any traditional full suits of heavy armor you might see in many other RPGs. Like Gallant's battle gear is just a regular shirt with his sleeves rolled up, and Avis is barely keeping his shirt on. All that is to say, there was a lot of thought and detail put into the lore of this world that informed the equally thoughtful art direction to make one of my favorite aesthetics in an RPG. I mean, just look at some of these environmental portraits. Just look at them.
Oh, would you look at this?
Yeah, well...
Would you look at that?
I'm definitely going to be using some of those as desktop wallpapers. They're like so captivating, and it all just hits me in the aesthetic bone. Aesthetic bone? Why did I write that? It's not just the static imagery that's amazing in this game. The extremely detailed pixel art animations are also stunning. Huge shoutouts to the animation team for pulling these animations off with such huge detailed sprites. I've really never seen any other TRPG have sprites this big, and to have them move so fluidly still is incredible. The only game I can really think of that comes somewhat close is Arc the Lad 3, and even then there's still quite a gap between them. Usually the focus of TRPGs is so gameplay centric that the visual presentation kinda takes a back seat, but I think Stella Deus really nails both aspects here. All this takes place in some of the most visually appealing map designs I've seen in a TRPG. I love that the camera is like freely adjustable so you can spin it all around at different angles and see all the details of the map even during attacks. Most TRPGs only let you rotate the camera to set angles, which makes sense and is definitely a bit more practical. Like, it's kinda dumb that sometimes you spin the camera in Stella Deus and it kinda messes up the controls a bit, but they're my controls, I can mess them up if I want. The trade-off of seeing these stunning maps from all angles is definitely worth it, I think. Elevating this great art and design is the incredible music of Stella Deus. The duo of composers for this game, Hitoshi Sakimoto and Masaharu Iwata, were actually the team behind the soundtrack for the Final Fantasy Tactics and Tactics Ogre games. These two legends always nail the more expected battle type of tracks, and those are definitely strong here in Stella Deus, but what took me by surprise was how beautiful and ethereal the more calm tracks were. There's a lot of really interesting and somewhat unexpected instrumentation choices on this soundtrack that manage to perfectly fit the otherworldly vibe of the story and setting. One kind of weird example is the shop theme that's all done with accordion. Something about this unorthodox instrumentation really makes this song stand out, and I guarantee it'll be burned into your brain by the end of the game. So yeah, there were some big names involved in the project on the audiovisual side of the team, and that's mostly what people praise about the game. But what about the gameplay side of things? Well, it was developed by Atlas, but there actually wasn't that many of the big names from there working on the gameplay. They were probably all too busy working on River City Ransom EX for the GBA. Oh, barf! No, but actually, they probably were too busy putting out 11 other games in 2004. Damn, Atlas, give these devs a break. Battle B Die Man for the GBA can wait. Wait, what even is this? It looks like anime mecha playing a weird version of that tabletop game called Crossfire, you know what I mean? Crossfire, you get Crossfire. Anyways, all that is to say that Stella Deus ended up being made by a really small offshoot team called Pinegrow that handled the whole development with only 5 programmers, 7 designers, and just a bit of help from other studios. The director of the game, Akiyasu Yamamoto, was only in QA roles before this and never directed a game before or after, so it's kind of amazing that the gameplay side of the game turned out so well, and it's what I consider to be the best part of the game. It'd be like if you only ever worked as like a video editor and then suddenly you directed a masterpiece like Spy High. So, how did this kind of ragtag crew manage to design such an awesome battle system? Well, for starters, they kind of had the blueprints laid out for them. Stella Deus' battle system was actually designed as like a spiritual successor to a TRPG on the PS1 called Hoshigami Ruining Blue Earth. There was actually a lot of overlap with people who worked on Hoshigami in the Stella Deus team. Sadly, for all the team members who have this overlap, these were the only 2 games I could find them ever being credited for. I wonder why that is. These are both solid games. Here's a fun fact to distract you from that depressing one. Hoshigami means star god in Japanese, and Stella Deus means star god in Latin, so yeah, the connection was very intentional. But why didn't they get to make other games? Anyways, the main thing connecting these 2 games is the implementation of an action point system, or AP system, into the TRPG combat. Basically everything from moving to attacking to casting magic costs different amounts of action points. This makes positioning super important and adds so much strategic depth. Like, the most basic example is that if you manage to position correctly and bait your opponent to rush towards you, you can then spend no AP on movement and instead double or even triple attack the enemy who's right next to you. Of course, this goes both ways, so if you don't end up killing that enemy, the next turn they might triple attack you back and totally bake your lasagna. Now, this system was pretty rough around the edges in Hoshigami, but for Stella Deus, they iterated and refined upon this system in all the right ways and made something truly amazing. Let's go into a little more detail about that gameplay, because even though it's my favorite part of the game, many other people have called it generic, boring, grindy, and slow. And the only one of those I can agree with is that it's slow, because yeah, it is. Everything takes just a little too long, and even menuing is just a little bit stiff. However, I played this game on an emulator and played at around 1.5 speed at most times, and oh my god, this solves all those problems and the game plays like a dream. Man, I really wish Stella Deus will one day get re-released with a speed-up feature like FF12 did, but that's almost definitely not gonna happen. So while I still think this game is great on original hardware, I kinda think you have to play it sped up on an emulator if you want to end up loving the gameplay as much as me. I realize that's kinda a huge caveat to have for my argument and all, but at least the game is really easy to emulate compared to other PS2 games. I mean, honestly, TRPGs are one of my favorite genres, but if I didn't play most of them on an emulator with a speed up feature, I don't think I would have ever gotten into any of them because almost all of them are too slow in my opinion. Yeah, I said it. You know, it had to be said. I don't even care if you have to retire my Epic Gamer credentials. Take them away, boys. Anyways, what about the other claims that the game is generic, boring, and grindy? Well, first of all...
Hey, listen. You didn't need to post that.
But really, I can see why people kind of bounced off the game feeling this way, and a big reason why is that those claims of it being generic, boring, and grindy are kind of tightly linked together. Let me explain. So, many people assume the game is grindy on a first playthrough because if you don't get the hang of the complex tactics mechanics quickly, you're gonna get your goose grilled by the first boss battle of the game. He will literally kill any of your party in like 2 hits, and if he just gets near you, he'll inflict a status effect called Fear that makes you unable to do anything but move. Because this spike is so early on, what most people probably do is go to the Catacombs, which is 100 floors of battles you can do on the side to grind up levels and money, and so you come back over leveled and all you have to do is move up and attack to win. which is generic and boring. You might as well just play Cookie Clicker if all you end up doing is pressing a button and seeing numbers go up. I'm not knocking Cookie Clicker either, that's just legitimately a better numbers going up experience. I mean, some people have played that game for years. I just think RPGs are way more interesting when you don't play so grindily. Would it be grindy or grindily? Or ground? Your playstyle is grounded, mister, go to your room. Now, I must admit that for my first playthrough, I did feel the need to do optional battles just a bit, and that ended up being fine for me. I didn't mind playing one of the battles in the catacombs or doing one of the side quest fights before each story fight, because those battles were also fun in and of themselves, so it didn't step into the territory of feeling like I was just grinding mindlessly. Also, when I was only doing one optional battle before each story fight, I still wasn't super over-leveled or anything. Then, as I got familiar with the mechanics more, like halfway through the game, I kinda only did optional fights every once in a while. And that ended up being a really good experience where I felt each battle was really well balanced. However, for my second playthrough, I tried to not grind at all as much as I could and found the game actually does allow for this quite well. It's kinda a shame most people won't have this experience though, because playing without excessive grinding was so much more fun and required so much more interesting strategy and planning. However, the game just didn't convey how viable this was quite well enough. Like for example, before the first roadblock boss, there's tutorials and tips you can read that'll give you the hint that you pretty much need to use the anti-fear skill if you want to stand a chance at a low level. But these tips are off to the side at the guild and even cost a small amount of money to read, so they're easily missable. That's like putting the secret to life in some random book behind a paywall. Wow, a lot of people have done that, huh? I wonder if they're all right at the same time. Okay, but even if you read that tip about the anti-fear skill and went into the fight with that in mind, you still need to strategize how you plan your moves each turn in a way where the boss is never within distance to attack you enough times in a row to kill you in one turn. This can get a little difficult to pull off, and you have to do this at a point where you're still learning the basics of how to best move using the AP system. It's like, did I have to take a few AP classes in high school to understand this AP system? Am I right? Am I right?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
It doesn't help that healing is also super limited at this point in the game because your magic points or MP don't regenerate at all. It's also possible you didn't realize you could recruit generic class characters to your party before this fight in side quests, so you might be going into this fight with only 4 party members that the story gave you instead of a full party of 6. All of these things and more would convince most people that they just need to grind to win, which isn't exactly the most exciting way to pace a game, and it leads to people not discovering all the super interesting strategies and mechanics that the game has. It's kinda like how the early Souls games didn't convey the most fun way to play the game and conditioned most people to play in a way that's pretty defensive and grindy. So yeah, I totally get where people are coming from, however I really wish people would give this game another shot, and instead of grinding when you die in a fight, instead think to yourself, what is this game trying to teach me here? Do I need to change up my skills and equipment? Do I need to position better and bait the enemy to make worse moves? All the answers to these questions are there without the need to grind if you know what you're doing. However, the big problem here is that the game hits you with all this way too early on and ends up not directly teaching you enough of the intricacies of the game that would have given you some of the answers to those questions. One big thing the game doesn't communicate well that would help a lot of new players so much is the nuances of the team attacks. Like, the best way to get good equipment throughout the whole game without needing to grind for money is to do big team attacks. The more party members you include in a team attack that kills an enemy, the better the items you get. But there's a problem here because pulling off these team attacks early on doesn't really seem necessary for winning fights, and the damage isn't so massive compared to the effort it takes to set up, so it doesn't necessarily look like something you need to do, so I can imagine many people might not make much use of them. This is kinda a shame because getting off these big team attacks is one of the most fun parts of the game, and it does a great job of incentivizing the player to master the AP system through clever positioning and manipulation of turn orders. The reward of better equipment that you get for pulling this off is also a great help if you're trying to avoid grinding. Unfortunately though, because there's this roadblock boss so early in the game, you likely won't realize ahead of time that you should have probably been implementing team attacks in all those early fights before the boss to get good enough equipment to make this fight easier. Now, if for some reason you were one of the 10 people who played Hoshigami first, you might have realized how important this team attack system is because it's pretty much a way better implemented evolution of that game's team attack system. But like I said, barely anybody in the West played that game, and Stella Deus wasn't even marketed as a sequel in any way. So most people aren't going to randomly have the foresight to realize how important the team attack system is, and almost no one would want to hard reset to a new game to redo all those early fights if they somehow did realize a little bit later. So people grind at the catacombs and play in a less interesting kind of way. Wow, did I really just spend all that time basically just to say Stella Deus is the Dark Souls of TRPGs? Why am I allowed to post to YouTube? Okay, but really, yeah, the game drops the ball in teaching you the most fun way to play in a lot of ways. However, like I said, that fun playstyle is completely viable. So what does the game do right in order to allow for this playstyle that I find so much more interesting and made me love the game? Well, for starters, the experience and skill points you gain is relative to the enemy you're attacking. So if you go into a fight under-leveled, you can sometimes level up with just 2 attacks. So if you can draw the fight out with good movement, you'll definitely level up and stand more of a chance. Conversely, if you're over-leveled, you gain less XP, which I guess was meant to de-incentivize grinding, but I don't think this really stops people because they still needed to grind for money to afford good enough equipment at the shop. One big reason people might feel the need to grind so much for money is the fusion system. Basically, if you want better equipment than what's available at the shop at the moment, or if you want to give a character a skill they don't have naturally, you have to head to the guild and fuse 2 things together either to get a new item, skill, or piece of equipment. Now, if you aren't using a guide and this is your first playthrough, you're probably going to go through a lot of trial and error here, where you're spending a lot of money on items to fuse together without knowing for sure how much it's really worth it. When you eventually do get a hang of the system, it's a feature that I love and it makes the economy of the game so much more interesting. You end up having to balance whether fusing up items to a higher level is worth it or if you just need to press on a few more levels before new higher level items are available at the shop. Furthermore, I love that when you do fuse better equipment, it always has the trade-off of making everything cost more AP. It balances the game really nicely around the fact that theoretically you can access super overpowered weapons earlier than you're supposed to with the fusion system. The game is like, yeah, you can fuse this OP weapon, but you won't be able to get a triple attack out of it, or you won't be able to get to the front lines as quickly, so you won't be hitting with it as often. So you actually have to think about if you can make that balance worth it. To feed 2 birds with 1 stone, this system also allows you to fuse to get skills that can then be applied to any character like I mentioned before. This totally opens up how much you can customize characters, and it's incredibly helpful for getting status effect preventing skills on all of your party. Or if you find one character is lagging behind in XP, you can teach them a heal spell that they can use on turns when they can't do anything else. Realistically though, this whole fusion feature really only becomes an engaging and rewarding system once you're quite experienced with it, so many beginners might feel like it's not worth their time after they waste a lot of money experimenting with it if they can just grind up their stats instead. Furthermore, unless you're using big team attacks, you won't be getting that many good items to sell or fuse with from battles, so you'll feel the pressure to grind for money to buy more items to fuse even more. God, so many problems in this game would be solved if the beginning of the game was a bit easier and better taught what elements are actually important to new players. At the same time, what they did pull off made the experience for players willing to push through the rough difficulty curve without grinding much more fun, and made almost every single battle right from the start super interesting. So I guess there is kind of an argument for both approaches. Well, I know which approach would have been right for sales though, that's for sure. In 2004, people just weren't ready for a game that tried to teach them through incredibly punishing and unforgiving ways. I really think times have changed though, and that so many people would love this game today if they gave it a shot with a little bit more prior knowledge that I'm sharing in this video, because Stella Deus has my favorite TRPG gameplay system by such a huge margin. The AP system alone makes this so much more tactical and positioning focused than other grid-based TRPGs. But when you add things like the wealth of equipment and accessory options, all the different character classes, zone skills, team attacks, MP management, and more on top of that, you get one of the most complex and satisfying battle systems to master ever. Building your party of 6 is actually one thing in this system that kinda doesn't have that much wiggle room to master though. Like, the story characters you get are better than the generic ones, so you're very likely gonna use them, and there's only 8 of them given to you normally, with only 6 being actually in your party for a majority of the game. There are secret characters you can unlock along the way, but unlocking them is just stupidly grindy and obtuse, and you need to be so high level to do it that those secret characters you get won't change the gameplay much, cause you'll just be wrecking everything super easily anyway from being so over-leveled. It'd be like becoming the best hacker in the world just to unlock a new light-up gamer keyboard. It's like, yeah, it's snazzy and new, but my old GameCube keyboard still works just fine.
Do you know anything about hackers? Can you jam with the console cowboys in cyberspace? What?
Personally, I don't mind having my party be pretty static throughout an entire game if they have enough depth, and they definitely do here, but fans of games where you have a diverse cast of characters you can recruit will be a little disappointed with how difficult it is to unlock the extra characters. It's kinda crazy how much effort was put into these secret characters that most players wouldn't even know how to unlock. Like, they all even have unique team attacks and legendary weapons to unlock through unique side quests. It really would have just been so much better if they were just easier to unlock. Well, at least the characters you do get are cool, right? Well,
I'm not so sure.
Actually, they're not the most interesting characters, honestly, but they get the job done and have a decent amount of depth. What really carries the story is the world's lore and the nuanced takes on themes of religion, apathy, environmentalism, and of course, capitalist exploitations as a means to create consolidation of power in order to control the masses. Wait, really? This game has that much depth to its story? The game with this voice acting?
Hey, what's that supposed to mean?
Yeah, this game has a decent bit of so bad it's hilarious voice acting. Mostly from the character Viper, whose actor just went way overboard in the weirdest way.
Cram it in your soup hole. I've got it under control.
But I swear, Stella Deus has a great story and thematically rich lore. Also, Viper's only in the story for the first quarter of the game, and the rest of the voice acting isn't actually that bad. Although I do love the gentle talk yelling the voice actors do when they're trying to get all emotional. It sounds like how I'd sing along to Screamo in middle school when my parents were in the other room. So yeah, this game gets clowned on a bit for its cheesy voice acting, and I wish I could find a way to swap it for the much better Japanese voices, but the English voices aren't really that bad once you get past Viper, so it's not like it's Chaos Wars bad.
Wow, I really can't move my body.
What did you do, Nicole?
Anyways, you can turn down the voice's volume in the settings if you end up not liking them, so it doesn't really matter either way. What's more important than the voice acting is the dialogue these actors are actually saying though. Stella Deus manages to tackle some really heavy topics, so the writing had to be really on point to work, and I think they actually pulled it off with the care and nuance these topics deserve. Okay, stop playing Viper clips to discredit my points. I swear this story's awesome. As I was saying, the story definitely isn't run-of-the-mill thematically. It takes place in the land of Solemn, which is on the brink of apocalypse thanks to a shroud of miasma that is mysteriously spreading over the world and taking all the life it touches. When this started to happen, people lost themselves in chaos until a new religion called Aquae emerged and united the people under one idea. That idea is that the destruction of this world through the miasma is God's will, and God aims to give us a peaceful end. Aquae's teachings are meant to bring peace through passivity and to calm people's souls by having them accept their fate. The peace this brought in such desperate and chaotic times led to the religion becoming massively popular. This is a good time to mention how beautifully the color palette reflects these themes. I love how washed out everything looks. This is a world heavily themed around apathy where people are losing hope, so it's fittingly devoid of bright pops of color. So yeah, the Aquae religion has become extremely prevalent, but things get a little complicated when an evil and powerful man named Lord Dignus— wait, Dignus? Really? You expect me to take this name seriously as something intimidating? His name literally just sounds like Dingus. Whatever, his cool character design makes up for his stupid name. So yeah, Lord Dingus— I mean Dignus. This reminds me of how like everyone calls it Balan Wonderland instead of Wonder World. Lord Dingus just rolls off the tongue better for some reason. Anyways, yeah, Lord Dignus sees the world in a state of passivity and capitalizes on this to try and dominate the world. Knowing that most of the people in the Aquae religion won't even fight back because of their teachings of passively waiting for a peaceful end. And this dynamic introduces a lot of the interesting messaging about apathy, passivity, and systems of control through the lens of religion. In some cases, religion in the real world can be abused to make people apathetic to the actual problems around them. Like, you can spread a message about how there are so many problems in our world today, but if you just believe in God and follow all his rules, you'll be given a peaceful end in heaven, so you don't really have to stress over trying to change the world in the limited time you have to be alive, since it's more important to follow God's teachings to give yourself a peaceful end for eternity, making it so the most important thing in your life will always be this religion.
If we just accept everything that happens and believe God wants it that way, we may not fear the world's end, but then we aren't taking responsibility for our own actions. We're just blaming God for our problems.
In this way, the promise of heaven is used to control people in a way that can make them quite passive, and even doubt their own feelings of apprehension at the state of the world because of the comfort giving over this control of your life can bring. It's a kind of toxic acceptance that can put you in a state that allows you to be manipulated quite easily. As we see in Stella Deus, many people prey on the religious followers of the Aquae in different ways because of how deeply ingrained they are in this passive state. In particular, Lord Dignus kind of represents how a power-hungry capitalist would exploit this mindset. He sees these passive people as less than human because they don't fight for dominance and power the same way he does. So he uses this to justify seizing control of their kingdom and resources. In this already near-apocalyptic world, he would rather make things worse for everyone as a means to seize control because of his power-seeking ego than use that power to try to prevent the literal end of the world. We'll get more into all that when we talk about the themes of environmentalism, but for now, let's get back to the plot. So as I was saying, Lord Dignus is on a warpath striving for power, and so his imperial forces are going around conscripting locals into a war against the Aequai. Our main characters, Spiro, Gray, and Adara's village is attacked by Dignus, and they and their friend Visor end up being forced to join Dignus at the threat of their whole village being destroyed. Oh, and yeah, I should mention, this game has prominent characters with the names Viper and Visor. Not confusing at all. Though it's kinda hard to mix them up because of how much of an impression Viper leaves. The reason Dignus wants Visor in particular on his side is his skills in alchemy, which is this world's metaphorical analog for science and technology. While Visor says he hopes to use alchemy to push back the miasma, that's not what Dignus is truly interested in. It turns out alchemy can be used to make incredibly powerful weapons, so Dignus wants to use this for his war efforts. But as we'll see, there's something mysterious about the way alchemy is powered. There are spirits in this world that, when killed, can be harvested as energy to be used for alchemy. Spiro, Gray, and Adara are sent out to harvest spirits like this for Visor, and even though they have some reservations about how cruel it seems to treat spirits this way, they think they're doing this to eventually push back the miasma, so they justify this cruelty to themselves despite feeling conflicted. Adara even calls the spirits cute, and they're kind of some freaky polygon weirdos, but once she said it, I was on board. I mean, look at these cuties. Besides the cuteness and their feelings, they don't have much basis to really question the practice of hunting these spirits any further, and so they gather this spirit energy to fuel Visor's alchemic weapons. That is until they meet Linnea, a shaman who tells them that spirits actually are what push back the world-ending miasma. The killing of the spirits to fuel alchemy is actually what is causing the miasma to spread faster and is bringing the apocalypse even closer. Just goes to show, sometimes you shouldn't always be wondering how to push technology further.
You ever wonder what the bottom of an Avatar shoe looks like? Well, bam! There it is.
But for real, this is a super interesting dynamic that brings in themes of environmentalism into Stella Deus. Spirits are a part of this world's nature, and metaphorically, they're kinda like an analog to trees in our world. Like, trees are what helps restore the atmosphere, but people instead cut them down to fuel society in a way that they feel is necessary or pushes forward technology, like how spirits are killed to fuel alchemy. Maybe oil or energy is a better metaphor, I'm not sure, but you get the point. So Linnea bands together with the main characters to open something called the Gate of Eternity, which will release millions of spirits back to the world and push back the miasma. God, I wish there was a Gate of Eternity in the real world that would plant like 100 billion trees instantaneously. And no, we can't depend on Mr. Beast's Team Trees to be our Gate of Eternity. Their goal of 20 million trees being planted is a really good example to build off of, but it still isn't close to being enough. And they also seem a little misguided sometimes, like the time they tried to fund ocean cleanup with NFTs, which is just so goddamn ironic. Anyways, obviously Dignus tries to oppose this plan to open the Gate of Eternity because he wants the world to be in chaos, but what's surprising is how many of the Aequai also oppose them, since they view preventing the end of the world as resisting God's plan for a peaceful end.
We believe in him and trust in his will. The world is slowly ending. That is a fact we cannot escape. All that remains for us is to pray.
This kind of works as an analog for people who are obsessed with keeping to the status quo, or they're in denial that we're headed towards the worst kind of ending, even in the face of quite predictable environmental disaster. Because viewing this as just the way it is or unavoidable can weirdly bring you peace. Even more unexpected than the Aequai opposing you is that Visor opposes the party too. Even though originally Visor was forced to join Dignus, Visor has now gotten lost in his obsession with alchemy, and so even though at this point he knows killing the spirits is pushing forward towards the end of the world, his drive to advance technology trumps all concerns about the environment. I think this is pretty clearly meant to reflect the side of science that pushes forward advancing technology that's used to further fuel environmental destruction, when those same resources could have been put towards saving the environment. Like, especially when the only people powerful enough to fund your scientific endeavors have ulterior motives, you're gonna end up wrapped up in some shady stuff, even if your ideals were optimistic like Visor's were at first. Later in the game, Visor actually reveals that if an absurd amount of spirits are used to the point where the miasma would definitely swallow the whole Earth, alchemy could possibly use the energy harvested from those spirits to make a relatively small barrier to protect the privileged few inside it from the miasma. I see this as a metaphor for how rich people in power in our world think it's a better idea to keep funding environmental collapse because later on they can just pour the money they made from exploiting the environment into projects that protect only a privileged few, like planning on colonizing another planet to save a small amount of people because the systems in power destroyed this one instead of rebuilding nature on Earth, which would save everyone. everyone. Now, all of these things pushing Solemn closer to an apocalypse are being accelerated by Lord Dignus. Dignus is exploiting the world's waning resources to exert power, and the popularity of the Equi religion allows him to pull this off quite easily. I think this reflects how capitalism thrives when people are conditioned into passivity so that those in power can continue to exploit the world's limited resources to cause even further scarcity that then consolidates power even more into their hands the more they push towards destruction. Now, not everyone in the Equi religion is just passively accepting this. Along Spiro, Gray, and Adara's journey, they meet Avis, a figurehead of the Equi religion who views Dignus's acceleration of the miasma as an affront to God's plan of a peaceful end. He uses this sentiment to fuel a holy war against Dignus, using a religion based entirely on the idea of passivity. This is super interesting thematically because it shows how, no matter how clear the idealistic dogma of a religion may seem, it can always be twisted to incite conflict and violence. Despite all the great teachings religion have given us in the real world that try to bring peace, there have always been people in every religion willing to use the control religion has over people to breed hatred and conflict. Now, of course, in this situation, even though Avis's twisting of his religion's views is kinda messed up, he's still fighting against an imperialist oppressor of his people, so I can't really fault him there. In a way, he's just trying to motivate his people who have lost all their hope because of their passivity to fight back. That's another major theme of the game, hope. The main character Spiro's name actually means hope in Latin, which is a little on the nose and pretentious. Like, if his name was just hope in English, it would sound so dumb and players would never accept it. Like, imagine if you wanted to express the themes of your game, so you called a character something like the fear or sin. Wait, never mind. Anyways, yeah, Spiro and his party are not only fighting to prevent the end of the world, they're also fighting to inspire hope for the future in the face of what seems like a certain apocalypse.
There's no way that God wants to destroy the world. You said that you eliminated people's hope, but you symbolize hope, Lumina, to the Equi and to anyone in despair. People can't live without hope. I think all our hopes are just different.
I think this is a nice message, because I think a lot of us in the real world see the world around us and feel powerless and defeated in the face of systemic powers so much larger than ourselves that seem to not even care about the survival of humanity. Stella Deus' message ends up being that you can't lose hope and that you might uncover something that can save us all that just hasn't been considered or discovered yet, like the revelation of the Gate of Eternity being real. Now, I don't think solving real-world problems will be as simple as finding a magic gate, but it is really important to not totally give up hope or give up fighting back against people in power, because that passivity is exactly what they want in order to control you. By the end of it all, after finding the Gate of Eternity and defeating Dignus, there is one last final boss that is literally the God of Destruction. This boss introduces themselves as being made of all the worst aspects of humanity, which is a nice last metaphor to cap off the journey. This God of Destruction even says that you can't truly defeat them because they'll always be revived, since humans will always have these bad things as part of their nature. However, Spiro and the party refute this by saying, yeah, even though humanity will always have those aspects to it, as long as we have hope too, we can always fight back against it. Of course, hope wins out in the end and you beat the final boss, putting a nice bow on the thematic metaphors of the game. But after that, you actually get a nice little "where are they now" cutscene after the credits. The most interesting of these shows that even the Equi religion is now being used to preach a message of hope for the future, which is a really nice thematic conclusion to that story. Like, it's kind of the other side of the coin of how Avis manipulates the teachings of Equi to incite a war. Here, using the Equi religion for hope seems opposed to the core teachings of the religion too, but it goes to show how religion is really just a malleable thing that can and should be shaped to benefit humanity, even if you can point to some contradiction in its teaching that might oppose the way you're using it to bring peace. It's like there's some stuff in the Bible that can be interpreted to enforce some horrible worldviews and incite hatred, like conservative Christians who preach sexism or homophobia. But on the flip side, there's Christians who choose to interpret that same Bible in ways that directly oppose those views and only aim to spread peace. It's a really interesting dynamic that I haven't seen many other games come close to addressing with the same nuance. Stella Deus really swung for the fences with the topics it chose to discuss, and it ended up hitting more home runs than Pablo from Backyard Baseball. I gotta commend the team at Atlas and Pine Grove for pulling off writing about these themes so well, and I gotta shout out the localization team at Atlas USA for not censoring or pulling any punches despite all this being kinda touchy subject matter. So yeah, thematically the story of this game is one of my favorites ever to think about, and I didn't even touch on everything I love about the story, like how Dignus represents a meritocracy, or how Danny DeVito should definitely play the role of the guy at the guild in a live-action Stella Deus movie, because this video is too long already. Now I do have to admit that in the story, there's not quite enough unexpected, exciting plot twists or emotional character moments to keep the story exciting on their own for a 35-hour game. So if you're not compelled by the grander themes, I could see some people looking at this story and saying,
"Whoa, that's interesting, but I sure don't care."
But you know what? Every cutscene is skippable, so if you don't care at all about these amazing thematic explorations, you can still really enjoy this game for just the gameplay. Actually, no. Don't skip the cutscenes. You're not allowed. Screw the haters. I got a message for all the Stella Deus haters posting on the message boards.
Why? Why did you post it?
For real though, Stella Deus really is a story worth experiencing for yourself, and the stellar gameplay on top of that has cemented it as one of my favorite games of all time. I can't wait to meet all the hundreds of new people who will be joining the Stella Deus fan club after watching this video, cause right now it's just me and these tumbleweeds. Just tumbling. Alright, I guess that's all I have to say about Stella Deus. Thanks so much for watching the whole video, or if you just randomly skipped to the end, I guess thanks too. You must really love outros. Well, subscribe if you want more horrible jokes like that, or like the video if you want to see less of them. Either way, my YouTube RPG numbers go up. I'm trying to unlock the legendary weapon called the sense of when to actually end a video, so I appreciate all the help. Okay, that's it. I'm all done. Bless you if you made it this far, and I hope you have a great day.
Bonus stage!
If you thought nobody cared about Stella Deus, wait till I tell you how little nobody doesn't care about the— Wait, that doesn't make sense. Okay, I'll just tell you. There were 2 Stella Deus mobile games that came out called Stella Deus, The Jet Black Spirit, and Stella Deus, The Age of Alchemy. I really tried to find some way to find either video footage or a way to play these games myself, but these games don't seem to be preserved at all to the best of my knowledge. I would love to see how they squish those big sprite animations onto a phone, man, but all I've got is these promotional screenshots to look at. Now what's even more elusive than that is the in-browser Flash game that was released before the PS2 game to promote the PS2 game's release. It was called Stella Deus Prelude, and all I can find of it is this semi-preserved Wayback Machine archive of the game. Unfortunately, it required a login and Flash player, so getting past the opening intro text seems impossible, and I can't find any pictures or videos of what the game actually looked like. Although a nice bonus of discovering this game was that it led me to discover the official Japanese Stella Deus website, stelladeus.jp, which you can still go back and see on the Wayback Machine, and it's pretty neat. The most interesting thing is probably the news updates that give a little insight on how the game was promoted in Japan, and for some reason all the posts start with some variation of, "Hi everyone, I don't like Sugi. Who is Sugi and why they're despised is just another mysterious mystery of this 2004 website." Okay, but anyway, please leave a comment if you know of any way to play these 3 games I mentioned, or if you even just find some footage of them, I'd really appreciate it, because I love these kind of obscure side releases to games. But alright, that's all I've got for the bonus bit, because I kind of ran into a dead end with those mobile and browser games, but yeah, thanks again for watching, and I hope you have a good one.